there, books you, welcome back to my channel. Today is Friday, June 21st. We're gonna do a little Friday reads check-in. These are the books that I'm gonna be telling you about today. And yeah, I know I say all the time that this is gonna be a quick check-in and the video gets to be 16 minutes long. We're not gonna do that today. This is really a quick check-in on these books. Some of them are books that I finished, some of them are books that I started previously and I continued, and a couple of them are books that I started, and then there's one that I haven't started yet, but I need to start in the next few days, so we're going to talk about all of them briefly. The first book that I finished this week, I read on Monday, and that is Do You Go Bernadette by Maria Semple. Was this Monday? It might have been Monday. I read this book in maybe a day. It was so engaging. I ended up giving this book a 5-star rating. It's one of those books that the synopsis is very misleading. So when you read the synopsis, it says, when 15-year-old B claims a family trip to Antarctica as a reward for perfect grades, her fiercely intelligent but agoraphobic mother Bernadette throws herself into preparations for the trip. That first sentence of the synopsis makes you think that the story is about B, that the story is about the 15-year-old girl. And so this book, I think, was mistakenly marketed towards YA readers, because the girl that I was supposed to read this with, she was 11 at the time. I don't know why this book was given to her. This is not a book for children. Not that it has anything that's inappropriate in it. It's just the level of the prose and the discussion of the mental disorder and the discussion of adult situations, adult fights, even though they involve the children and even though the people involved only know each other because they're parents of students at this middle school. The book is not about the children, the book is about the adults. And maybe because I don't read book synopses and get really involved in what a book synopsis says and whether it matches with the rest of the story, maybe that's why I wasn't bothered by it. So yeah, it starts off with a 15-year-old girl's report card, and it tells you that she's gotten these great grades and now she's about to be rewarded. She wants to go to Antarctica with her parents and her mother, who's agoraphobic. I don't think that's a correct definition for what Bernadette has, but that is the marketing ploy. She's not an agoraphobe because she goes out, she takes her daughter to school, she interacts to the point where she fights with her neighbors and her fellow parents. And yeah, she's not an agoraphobe. She just doesn't like people. And as we delve deeper into Bernadette's story, we understand why she doesn't like, well, I don't know if we really understand why she doesn't really like people, but we get more of her story. There's a historical discussion and historical exploration of why she has become kind of a recluse and why the family moved from California to Seattle and inhabited this really old building that used to be a reform school for girls, and where Bernadette is now raising her daughter. And she's criticized for everything. She gets into fights with her neighbors. I love the book. I love the fact that it was epistolary format, and we got a lot of investigation of these relationships through messages and emails and journal entries, and I loved it. And yes, the information is being collected by this 15-year-old girl, but it is so not about her. Love this book. If you haven't read this, check it out. Bernadette is a fascinating character. The second book I finished this week was Valencia and Valentine by Susie Krauss. This is a finished copy that I got from the publisher. I got it to review, but I love that it's not an ARC. It's a finished copy, and oh, I love this cover. It is so beautiful. The naked hardback is really pretty too. I have to put these books down so I could show it to you. But love these end papers, man. This midnight blue and contrasted with that yellow is really pretty. But here's a naked hardback. Yeah, let's just take a minute to appreciate the pretty book, and the fact that it was such an interesting story doesn't hurt either. I ended up rating this one 4 stars, and it's also about mental disorders. We have these two main characters. One is Mrs. Valentine, one is Valencia, and we get dual timelines, dual narratives, and we're not really sure when each of the stories are set, because they both seem to be people who are going to meet, but we don't know how and whether they can meet, if they're even operating in the same timeline. Mrs. Valentine is an 80-something year old woman who a young woman comes to help her do some household duties, and she starts telling her the story of her life, the story of how she met and fell in love with her husband and how he eventually disappeared. The other main character is Valencia. She's a debt collector, so she's one of those people who would call if you haven't paid your credit card bill. And both of these women, Valencia is 35, Mrs. Valentine is 87. But both of these women have a lot of the same characteristics. They're both suffering from some mental disorders where they constantly think about death. They seem like they have OCD, but it's not quite the textbook definition of OCD, in that Valencia struggles in her personal relationships. She can't shake hands with anyone, and if she touches something, she has to go wash her hands. But when she goes to wash her hands, she can't even use the toilet paper to hold the door to get out of the bathroom. She's stuck in the bathroom until someone comes and opens the door so she can kind of race out and brace the door with her feet. So she has a therapist who's been encouraging her to take a trip. She's also afraid of flying. Yeah, Valencia is afraid of everything. And she has a therapist who's been encouraging her to take a trip on a plane so she can get over her fears. She's also afraid of highways. Valencia's afraid of a lot of things. And then she starts a relationship with a person on the phone. And for a lot of the story, not until the final pages really, do we know who the main characters are and how their stories fit into each other's lives. But it was so engaging. I have a lot of tenderness, I have a lot of compassion for people who have mental disorders, because it's one of those sicknesses that a lot of people can't see. They can see the symptoms, but they can't see what's causing it. And I don't know if we need to know what causes something in order to be compassionate towards the person who's suffering. But I really enjoyed this little look inside the minds of these people and how they dealt with what they were going through. The author also explored the lead up to what caused these people to kind of have this inability to function the way maybe most people function. So I really appreciated the backstory, but it was also so entertaining, even though for a long time I was just struggling with who these people are. But it was good. It was really well done. I gave this 4 stars in the end, and not because I got a free copy, but I really like this story. So those are the 2 books that I finished this week. Then I continued 2 books that I started, one that I've been reading since maybe the first week of the month, and I'm only at page 252 in Doris Lessing's The Sweetest Dream. And I think I might have called this The Sweetest Thing in my video last week. It's The Sweetest Dream. You could see it right here. I'm reading this one because Britta Bowler is hosting a Noble Woman read-along, where every month we're reading a different book by a different female winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature. This is the June pick, and if it wasn't for that read-along, I might not have ever gotten to this book specifically, and I don't know how long it would have taken me to get to this author, because I have an ongoing project to read all the winners of the Nobel Prize for Literature, but Doris Lessing really wasn't on my radar for I don't know how long to come. So I'm reading this one, and it's difficult. It's not a hard read, but I'm suffering from the lack of transition. So I've told you this book is set, or at least it started off in the 1960s in England. We have a main character named Frances, who she and her ex-husband, they're separated. They had 2 boys while they were together, and now that her ex-husband is not supporting her and she's having trouble supporting herself, she's moved into the home where her ex-mother-in-law lives. So there's a huge family house. The ex-mother-in-law lives upstairs. There are many floors, and Frances and her 2 sons occupy maybe the middle of the house. And there's an assortment of the sons' friends. They're teenagers when we start meeting and interacting with them. And some of them are estranged from their own parents, and they're looking for shelter. And Frances takes in all of these kids, takes care of them, not just in terms of feeding them, but also sends them to school, goes to the police with them when they get in trouble, because they're all rebels in one way or another. Frances's ex-husband is a communist, but we also see that Frances herself and her ex-mother-in-law Julia, and even the children, they all have these vestiges of communism. There's all this resistance to the establishment, and they have these kind of free lives, I mean, in lots of different respects. And I'm at page 252, and I feel like at this point there should be some change, there should be some difference, but we're still getting a lot of the same themes. So it is a little bit entertaining, but we're also getting a lot of micro narration, a lot of micro detailing. The really interesting thing about this book is that there are no chapter breaks, so there is no transition. It's just one scene after another that kind of mirrors the scenes and every scene before it. I'm at page 252. I'm about halfway into the book. Goes up to about 470 pages, and I need to finish this in the next week because the end of June, I want to finish this. And I can't read too much of it at once just because nothing's happening, man. It's what everybody's complaining about in the book club, the Goodreads discussion. Everybody's talking about, when is this going to change? I don't see any transition happening where anything is going to change because these characters seem like they're very symbolic of different movements, different parts of history. And we know how history doesn't really change. There's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new happening in this book. So I don't know if this is representative of Doris Lessing's writing, if these are themes that she writes about in all of her novels. I don't know, but I'm enjoying finding out. It's a little bit of a frustrating process to read this book, but I'm glad that I'm not just reading this, because if I was, then it might bother me. But every time I go in for 50 pages or so, it's okay. It's like one of those TV dramas that you watch episode every time and there's no change. There's just comic relief, a little bit of entertainment, and you come back next time for more of the same. But Doris Lessing, so I'm continuing with this one. You'll hear more about it next week, I suppose. Next book that I'm continuing from last week is the short story collection An Unrestored Woman by Shoba Rao. This is the author of Girls Burn Brighter. I'm doing a buddy read of this with Kay, who's one of my subscribers. Hi, Kay. And we're enjoying this. The stories are a little bit uneven, and I don't mind because I mean, I've written short story collections myself. I'll link down below where you can check out my short story collection if you're interested in getting a copy. But Shoba Rao's short stories, they're very engaging. They're very different. And we're at the 5th short story right now. We're reading a story a day, and every story seems to link a character from the previous story, and I like that. I like that there's a little bit of a continuity, even though the stories themselves that we're focusing on in one story don't carry over to the next. There is a little bit of a connection in that we see that those main characters or characters from one don't disappear. You see them in a different aspect of their life, in a different time and place, in a different persona almost. So I'm enjoying that. The first few stories were characterized by people who were living during the period of partition and actively experiencing that conflict, being victims of the violence that occurred during that time. Story 4 and 5, not so much. We're now focusing on the kind of the next generation, the people who have moved away from India, their lives as immigrants in other places in the world. They're having now more first world problems, you know, no longer having to worry about their husbands dying in random acts of violence. Now they can focus on the husbands being unfaithful, which is a completely different tragedy. But I'm enjoying the short story collection. I'm looking forward to reading more. So far, each story has been about 20 pages, and I kind of like the evenness of that, but some of them I'm enjoying a little bit more than others. A couple of the stories felt like too many themes were being introduced without enough time to explore each one, but the fact that the characters reappear give me hope that we're going to see some kind of resolution that doesn't happen in each story, but happens over the breadth of the book. So I'm looking forward to continuing with this one. You'll hear more about it next week. And then we get to the two books that I started this week. I haven't gotten very far in, but I'm intrigued to continue. The first is Night Film by Marisha Pessel, and I'm reading this one because I'm a Patreon of Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany, and this is the book that her Patreon followers chose to read together in June. And I really wanted to participate, so even though this is a huge book, I signed up. So I'm reading this, and Bethany finished, and she gave it 1 star before I started reading. So I was thinking maybe I shouldn't waste my time reading a 600-page book that Bethany hated. She said it's one of her 2 lowest rated books so far, and Bethany has read over 100 books this year. So that this is at the bottom of her pile doesn't bode well for my enjoyment, except that Bethany and I don't have the same reading taste, and we don't look for the same things in books. So a couple other people, when I talked about this in my library haul, which I'll link down below, if you haven't watched it, go watch it. A couple of people told me that they read it and they liked it. Those are people who I've done buddy reads with and know that we do have similar reading taste. So that buoyed my spirits up, and that's the reason that I started and I'm continuing. So I'm at page 48. Everything that I've read so far, I read in one sitting. I sat down, I opened the book, and I couldn't put it away. I only put it away because I was reading it on the train and I'd gotten to my stop. And I'm going to continue because I'm loving it. The daughter of a wealthy but very reclusive movie maker has committed suicide. We're getting the story now from the perspective of a journalist who had planned to investigate her father because her father has had a very tumultuous career. People have said that his films contribute to violence, and so his films are no longer being distributed in mainstream, but he still has a huge underground following, literally and figuratively. And a journalist had said that he should be investigated and maybe targeted, and he lost his job. And now that same journalist seems like he's the person who's going to investigate the suicide of that movie maker's daughter. And I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued. The fact that this book is set in New York, I mean, you know, I love books that are set in New York, and I'm loving the format. Like the first few pages, we get these Time magazine, online Time magazine articles, and we're seeing like real time. If you went online to look up some case and you went through some rabbit hole to try to find out the backstory to the backstory to the backstory of what happened, this is what you'd get, and this is what this book is. And so I know it's dark, I know it's twisty, I know it's about a crime and maybe crimes that have been committed around it, but I want to read it. So I'm going to be going through this one, and I don't know if it's going to be a fast read, but the fact that I'm reading this and I know it's going to be dark means that I needed something else to lighten the mood, which is why I also started Queeny by Candice Carthy Williams. This is the first book that I'm going to be reading from my hashtag Read Caribbean. June is Caribbean Heritage Month. I want to read something by a Caribbean author, and I got this one from the library. Again, this one appears in my library haul video, link in the description box if you haven't watched that video yet. This one is set in England, and our main character is the daughter of Jamaican immigrants. And yeah, I love it. From the first page, I love it. She's a journalist, which means that these two books are linked because our main characters are journalists. So there's going to be a book links video at the end of this month. Look out for it. It seems like it's light and it's fun, and it's about something. It's about a culture and a people that I identify with because I am also a Jamaican immigrant living in a different country. And yeah, it's fun. We're reading about interracial relationships and a young woman who's a writer and dealing with the changing ideas about life. And then there's this young woman having a conversation with an older woman who is a representative of the same Jamaican old school ideology, and they're trying to relate, but they have very different perspectives. Even though they have the same background, they're just living very different lives, and I love that. So I'm hoping that I continue to love this book. I started it. I can't wait to finish it. This is a book that I'd like to just sit down and get immersed in. Just read the whole thing in one sitting. So we'll see if I can do that later today. So those are the two books that I started recently. I'm also reading aloud chapters of Maya Angelou's second memoir. This is Gathered Together in My Name. I read aloud the entire first book, and those videos are in a playlist. We're now at chapter 7, I think, in this book. So if you haven't read the book and you'd like to hear me read it aloud, those videos are going to be linked down below. I'm going to be continuing this one. New videos are coming pretty soon. The last book that I'm going to tell you about is one that I haven't started yet, but I'm going to be starting it over the weekend. That is Peter Carey's Oscar and Lucinda. This is the 1998 winner of the Man Booker Prize. And this is a book that I should be reading in June for the book club. Even though I haven't read all the books up to this point so far, I feel like I want to read this because book club, if anyone out there is following the book club, I want to at least be ready to discuss it if you're ready to discuss it as well. So I'm going to start reading this one. The hope is to finish this one by next week. It is long. This is over 500 pages. You know, it's really funny how the lengths of Booker Prize winning novels have varied. In the beginning, the books were pretty short. Then we start to get to much longer books. And yeah, one of the longest books was the 2013 winner, I think it was. The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton was almost 900 pages. So, but yeah, this is 500 pages. Peter Carey's Oscar and Lucinda. I'm going to be reading this one pretty soon. And I don't have anything to tell you about it yet, but I'll be telling you about it in my Friday reads next week. These are the books that I talked about today. From the bottom, the 2 books that I just started, 3 books in the middle that I'm continuing. 2 want to buddy read, want to read along, want to read aloud. The 2 books at the top are the 2 books that I finished this week. And of course, right here, Oscar and Lucinda, the book that I haven't started yet, but need to start in the next couple of days. So give me a thumbs up if you like this video. If you like Friday reads, I'm sorry, the video went way longer than I had planned. But give me a thumbs up if you liked it anyway. Subscribe if you want to see more. Click the links down below. Explore other videos that I have made and put up on this channel. I'd love to talk with you in the comments. Let me know if you do a Friday Reads video. You could put your link down below so I could go watch it. Or if you don't make a Friday Reads video, just tell me the book that you read this week that was the most fun, the most interesting. My best read this week was Maria Semple, Where Do You Go Bernadette. I loved it. 5 stars. So thanks for watching this video. Let's talk in the comments, and until next time, happy reading. Bye.